really pleased to welcome you to our webinar about walkthroughs, and we're going to address this on the basis that you don't know that much about it, in case you don't, and if you already do know quite a bit about it, it's going to help you, make a decision about whether you want to get involved with us or not. And I'm Tom Sherrington. I'm one of the writers, and this is my partner Oliver.
Hi, hello.
And we've also got going to have some input later from Fran Hargrove is there. If you want to just wave, Fran. Fran is basically the director of the Harrow Education Partnership, who are running the program that we're doing with them. She's going to tell you a bit about our involvement. So I'm going to start off by just saying a little bit about I think, Oliver, if you want to mute yourself while I'm doing it, so I can get the speaker view on. Is that okay? And then we'll swap over. Great. So what Walkthroughs is basically started off like as books. So some of you will access the books, and which is basically these. And we've got a number of we've had a fantastic response to people buying the books. And we've also got the volume 2 has just come out, which just came out in March. We're very excited. And we've also had it translated into Dutch. So here we have Deur Lupus, which is the Dutch translation. We're very excited about that. And so we're pleased that Walkthroughs as a book is being shared. But the main thing we want to talk about today are the resources that we have and the way that we've developed them to support schools in developing programs of professional development and leading on to instructional coaching. So hopefully by the end of the session, you'll get a sense of what the Walkthroughs do, where you can find them, what you would get access to if you subscribe to our materials, and some understanding of how a tool like Walkthroughs can support a professional development. So Oliver's going to talk through first, basically the background to Walkthroughs. Then I'm going to show you what the resources include, and then we'll ask Fran and another colleague, Matt, who's going to be joining us to tell us what he's doing at his school, he or the comprehensive school in Wales, and then we'll take some questions. So first of all, Oliver, I'll hand over to you.
Hello, you're going to tell me, Tom, whether you can see my screen now?
Yeah, that's all good.
Hello, so here's a very brief introduction to really why the Walkthroughs are, why we thought they were a good idea. And these will be concepts and ideas that you've come across and often enough. So I spent 3-4 decades sitting in chairs in courses, and each time taking notes and being pretty clear, especially as I taught in a special school context, that whatever the person up front was saying, however famous they were, they didn't know my class, my children. So I was always interpreting what they were saying for a special school context, and then cutting and adding because I knew what would work in my classroom. And that makes perfect sense. And it also makes perfect sense to tell your colleagues what you did. And of course, I told my colleagues what I did, how I amended the technique and how it worked in my class. And as they probably listened, they were saying, oh yeah, but Oliver's not very good at that, so I better change what he's doing. And then they do the same thing. And in this kind of serial run of conversations, things change. And in the end, the very thing that made the technique effective has probably been dismissed. And it was Dylan Williams some 10 years or so ago who picked up a phrase that's become quite popular in education now, called lethal mutation. With all good intentions, Dylan Williams says probably after 3 such conversations, the major strengths of the strategy have disappeared and it becomes something else. And then it becomes less effective, and then we get disenchanted, and then we move on to something else, which then leads us to another phenomenon, which I've termed this time called professional amnesia. And I had that because when I was leading courses in dual coding, I'll often used to get a number of teachers saying, oh, I used to do that, 10 years or so ago. So we don't even remember what worked in our own repertoire. And yet as a profession, we forget very easily. And so we're always susceptible to this round of the latest thing. So lethal mutation and professional amnesia. And so and we're not unique. This thing's happened in many professions, and Atul Gawande is a surgeon who also has a column in the New York Times, and he talks a lot about coaching. How do we get better in our professions? And he wrote the Checklist Manifesto. And in his study for that, he found there really wasn't a profession that he analysed and looked at the analysis of other professionals in which individual performance couldn't be improved with some idea of a checklist. And what that checklist is, it identifies what it is the best performers do and captures it. Otherwise, he found we're forever looking for this mysterious thing called talent and spending all our time searching for this talent, as opposed to making sure that everyone improves by capturing, identifying what it is this nebulous term, abstract term called talent looks like behaviorally, what we do. Of course, we have a reaction, quite rightly, to the idea of checklist. I mean, it depends how far back you've been. If any of you did the national strategies, they were full of checklists. You must do this. And there were checklists with times, 3 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes. So what are the advantages of checklists without any of these really limiting constraints? Well, let me quote Jim Knight. Jim Knight, I don't know whether you've come across him. He has probably the most experienced person globally in education utilizing instructional coaching, over 20 years worth. And this is what he says. He used these lovely 2 words. I'll let you read it. So a checklist needs to be precise enough so you can use it here and now. It's useful, it's practical, it works. I know what they're talking about. You get an immediate sense of what to do. At the same time, it needs to be provisional, because it's not possible for someone to write a series of steps so precisely they'll be appropriate or effective in all and any context. I mean, think of the age range, think of all different factors. So it needs to be provisional. And we've incorporated that. In fact, we've incorporated it and reminded you on every single page, every single spread, every single walkthrough about the ADAPT approach. And Tom may go into that later on. And the resources that we're going to show you have the ADAPT process inherently part of it. And it's a 5-step process that prompts you with questions of how you can make the walkthrough personalized, adapted to your particular context, how you can make it provisional. And so all of that means that the walkthroughs are a core set of techniques which are understandable by teachers of all subjects and ages, who then apply it, execute it in different ways, obviously. And while we've had a couple of years now of quite rightly stating how the different subjects in the curriculum are unique, and they have their unique structure, their unique culture, and so on. It isn't true, however, that there's no overlap. There are teaching techniques which are common to all particular subjects. And so what we find is that teachers now have a common language, a common structure, a common understanding in which really fruitful conversations can take place from their different contexts and points of view and across their shared understanding of what is involved. And so we've also made it visual. And this is a book I picked up in a secondhand bookshop down in Bridport. It was in the 1940s. Adam the Gardener. It came out every week in the Express or the Telegraph. And you'll see it looks like that. And you may think, aha, that's where they got their idea. Well, actually, you wouldn't be far wrong. So they had, that's half of a spread. So they would have 6 such columns. We have 6 columns, 1 for the introduction and 5 for the descriptions of each step. So there you are, Adam the Gardener, look it up, marvelous book. And so why we included visuals? Because they do a number of things. One, they're not real life. Real life, either live or in a video, continually the research shows that it isn't necessarily on its own sufficiently understandable by all viewers. So it's too rich. There are too many points of information of where you could look at. And also it's too fast, it's transient. So what visuals are able to stop motion. It addresses transience, probably the most critical part of someone's ability to understand something. It also, because it simplifies, it can show something invisible. So just like comics, it can show you what someone's thinking for a start, and it can remove all the elements that you don't want them to be distracted by. So it really helps focus people's perception. And lastly, what it can do in the same way, it can distort to highlight the message. So it can make things bigger, larger, more prominent. So you really get the message. And I've had great fun doing that with the walkthroughs. So back to Jim Knight again. He says, to be an instructional coach, and instructional coaching isn't life executive coaching, where if I'm your coach, I ask you what your goal is in life, and I know nothing, I have no technical knowledge, but I work with your beliefs and your emotions and your responses. No, instructional coaching, as the word might suggest, is very technical, it's very practical, it's down to earth. And so if you're an instructional coach at a school, as he says, you're really going to be insufficient if you don't have technical knowledge with regard to a whole repertoire of techniques. And that takes some decade or so to build up. Obviously, this is what one of the major aims we had in mind with regard to providing schools with this repertoire. So if you bought volume 2 or not, there's with 50 odd walkthroughs in each volume, we have 100 step-by-step precise techniques. And as you may know, and even be anticipating, we haven't started it yet, though we've started talking about what might be in volume 3. So this time next year, there'll be 3 volumes to contend with, and that really should be as large a repertoire as you would ever hope to find. Changing the tack somewhat, because they're visual, there's this phenomenon, and I've had so many teachers, when I explain it, they go, oh, that's what you mean. I do that anyway. I didn't know it was a thing. I certainly didn't know it had a word. And what it is that part of coaching involves feedback. And however skillful and well-intentioned and wonderful you are, all feedback to the recipient, the one getting the feedback, however well we disguise it with our professional behavior, is personal. And the degree to which it's personal is a degree to which it can be a hindrance to learning, fully accepting what's being said. So there's this phenomenon. You may want to try this out later on at home if you a difficult conversation to have. Instead of being face-to-face, go side by side. That immediately makes things different. The dynamic changes. And the third point, instead of one point is one person, second point is the other person, you introduce a third point that you both look at. And this, of course, is a perfect place for the entrance for the walkthroughs. So whether they're on paper or on screen, they become the shared vision. And so we talk about the teaching in really quite an objective way. And so the message that the coach gives is made distinct from the messenger of who the coach is. Try it out. It's 3-point communication. It sounds complicated. It's really simple and highly effective. And so coming to the end now, we have what Tom and I did is Tom did nearly all the writing and I did the imagery. And together it's a really powerful combination, but it's not absolutely perfect. To make it perfect that's where you come in. So you would then execute an adaptation or very high fidelity adoption of the instructions of the walkthroughs. And then you might allow one of your colleagues to watch you. And if that were the case, just think of their learning. They'd have had a really great verbal description, be really precise. Then you'd have some visual prompts that help you make it a bit more visceral, have a sense of what it feels like. And then to see it in action, really powerful. And we've had a few schools and colleges give us some of their videos that they've already started doing this three-way perspective of understanding teaching strategies. So they, in sum, is kind of the reasons that gave us the impetus to create the walkthroughs. And now Tom will take you through to show you what that looks like in terms of under the hood, behind the scene. in the website itself. So I'll
Thank
just
you,
stop
Oliver.
sharing and I'll mute myself.
Okay, thank you very much. That's fantastic overview of the basic philosophy behind it. And so what we find is that we've got this tool that we wanted to make, and the books were written with that in mind, that the 5 stages and the toolkit. But straight away we realized that when schools are delivering training, people need resources. And there are lots of very practical things. When you're delivering a training session, you want to have visuals that people can look at together. And so you want them to be large. You want them to access them on their phones and on their laptops. So they need to be digitally portable. So we thought we need to make a set of tools to make that. So we've created this website with some help from various quarters. And I'm going to share to show what happens when you log on to do it. So I'll just share my screen here. So essentially in the Walkthroughs website, which starts off life, this is the front page of the website that everyone can see. And that's just the public page. But when you're a subscriber, there's a basic level, which is basically covers just the volume 1 materials, the yellow book. But if you're a full level subscriber as a school or a college, you get access to everything. So volume 1, 2, and 3. And there are different levels for that. But I'll just show you what that looks like. So in here, we've got some webinars, so that everything we do, we try to record. And Oliver and I do monthly webinars to explain what the walkthroughs do and how to use them, and some of them are captured here. There's a Google site, which I'll show you in a minute, with all the stuff embedded, and there are things that you can just download. So once you've subscribed, you don't have to keep paying every year for the materials. You can just open these folders and download the slides, and then you can keep them forever. So that it's really just a purchase in a sense. So you can see here the sets of resources that we have. We have the slide deck for why. Now, what's the why section? Well, the why section includes some research summaries. It includes things like summaries of Rosenshine's principles, or what the key messages from Dan Willingham's Why Don't Students Like School, or key messages from Dylan William and various key thinkers. So we've got that. The how section covers how do we use walkthroughs in practice. So some suggestions for how to do lesson observations, how to do things like we're using the adapt process, how to run a CPD cycle. And then you've got the 6 main sections: behavior and relationships, curriculum planning, explaining and modeling, questioning and feedback, practice and retrieval, and mode B teaching. Now, mode B teaching, if you're not familiar with that idea, which we do explain in the book, is sort of everything else except instructional teaching. So it's things like projects and inquiries and collaborative learning and things like that. And there are some other additional things. Now with the volume 2, we've got the same structure again, but now we go onto the blue book and we've got a whole other set. So you can download these PowerPoints. You basically own them once you subscribe. And those have proved to be very useful. Alongside that, we also provide trainer notes. So inside this folder here, you'll see trainer notes, which includes step-by-step guides for all of the slides. If I open this, you'd see all of the PowerPoint slides annotated. So if you're going to use the slides, you've got some guidance about what to say. And we've got this PDF here, which is called the Getting Started Guide. And we get asked this question all the time: how do we get started? So we've devised what we call the 5 E's process. And essentially, we like things that go in 5s. 5 E's means engage people first, so show people what walkthroughs are and have a launch event. Explore, which means you have to plan a series of meetings and ongoing process throughout the year for people to pick a walkthrough and work on it. Evaluate means what you do at the end of the year. So have something to aim at, where at the end of the first year you say, well, how do we do? Where do we reach? And plan. And then extend and embed kind of when you're into the second cycle, where you're familiar with the tools and you're trying to just make them work even better. So that's a process, and we have various samples. We talk about different types of schools. Some schools have got, they just want to start right from the beginning. Everyone's doing 2 or 3 walkthroughs the same, and it's very sort of tight, and they just want it to be nice and simple. Other schools, all the teachers are much more sort of maybe experienced, and so lots of different teachers are choosing walkthroughs of their own. And so we've given you case studies there in that set of tools. We also have videos. So there are video materials, which I'll show you in a minute. So in here, there are videos for all of the walkthroughs, and also there are the webinars. So there's Oliver and me, all our faces coming up on the screen there. every time we do a webinar, everyone gets it for free. So another question we get asked all the time is, will this webinar be recorded? And the answer is always yes, and there it is. So you can go back to see the introductory webinars, all the discussions that we've had. And also you'll see in them me talking about curriculum design, me talking about questioning techniques, Oliver talking about instructional coaching, and you can reference these anytime you like. So you're getting a growing sort of repository of video training resources which you can use. So all that is part of it. So you're part of a community of people. There's a workbook and some other pages here. So there's lots of resources. Now, what we found was that a lot of people were using them, and then to our great joy, we discovered through the community of schools as it was been growing over the last year, we've now got over 1,000 individual schools and about 850 individual subscribing organisations so far. But one of the early adopters was Heal the Comprehensive School in Wales. We're going to hear from Matt in a second. And his school, Matt really started developing all the resources which are available on a Google Drive. And he created this Google site, which was so good. We just said, can you build it for everybody? So he has. So now you have all the resources embedded in Google, and they work just superbly well. So basically, I might make that slightly bigger here. All the resources are available here. So you can see from this drop-down menu, the things are included in the Why section, the Rosenshine's Principles and Ethic of Excellence. If I click on that, it opens up a page for Ethic of Excellence, and it's got the key slides explaining what Ron Berger says, and it links exactly to the book. So it says page 30, which means quite easy. I can turn to page 30 in the book, and it's reassuring me the same page, there it is. And so there's the slide deck, there's the book, and I can read the book and just click through the slides. The slides are all just play them in the drive, and I can do this. And there's a short video of me explaining some of those things there. So those are all what the why sections are. The core of it, though, the walkthroughs lie in these sections here. So behavior, relationships, curriculum planning, explaining and modeling. So let's say we're going to look at questioning techniques. Well, here are all the questioning techniques. So you access all of these, and each of these are the playbook. So when you're talking about a CPD session or a coaching process, the repertoire of strategies that Oliver talked about is represented here. And we can go to cold calling again. People might have this on their Kindle. The Kindle book, a version of the book is only £3. So what we found is quite a lot of people have asked their staff and then they reimburse them to get a Kindle each. So there's £3 each. It's the cheapest way of getting every single person to have access to the walkthroughs. And they can look at the cold calling on their phone. They can look at it on the bus or whatever, or they can access the website and see this on any device. And actually, this Google site works beautifully on a phone. And so we've got the book. We could be turning to page 90 and seeing the walkthrough for cold calling, and so we can all just discuss what cold calling is. So cold call means this set of steps. We ask the class a question, we then give thinking time, and then we select someone to respond. And we decide it's no hands up, no calling out. And then when the student's given us an answer, we engage with that response, and we get a bit more out of them to see what else they know. And then we do that same process with another student. And so we're getting a range of answers to the same question. And that's our view of what cold calling should be, or could be. And so again, we've got the slides here and the video. And it just means that there's multiple ways of making sure that a team of people all understand the technique in the same way. So we avoid the lethal mutation, and we avoid the amnesia, because there it is. You've got a new teacher coming in, he's hearing people talking about cold calling, may have missed the initial training session, or you can just say, look, let's have a look at it online. There it is. We do cold calling here. This is what it is, and he can pick up on that. So that all the tools are like that. It could be, we wanted to select another one. So if I go to the questioning section again, the home page here, say one of the new ones, no Optout. Well, what's that? Again, the same pattern. Now with the new videos, we've got ones here. I made these just recently. They play the video. No Optout. And what I found is that you can play the video and the slides at the same time, which I'm quite excited about. So
no Optout is a classic Doglamov teach like a champion strategy, which does anybody know? My personal preference is not to use the strategy of saying, who thinks they can help James out? Because that sort of creates a sense of
so you've got me explaining basically what that technique is. I don't know why we've got Bart Simpson that's popped up there. The slides are there, so we can interact with this idea in lots of different ways. And the point is that we can develop what Oliver called shared understanding. Through looking at this, we all can work out what no opt-out means. We've got me talking about it there. And then we've got the basis for a training session where we've really explored it. So that's important, that when you've got this whole repertoire of techniques, that it's always possible to go back to the core and see what it means. Of course, then you need to then talk about what it looks like in practice. So we need to start looking at how to implement them. And that's where the adapt process comes in. So all the ideas in the book are reproduced on the website here. And adapt is a really key concept in the whole of the Walkthroughs system. So when Oliver and I sat literally at this table here a couple of years ago, and we were saying, right, so what are we doing? We said what we don't want to be doing is making a checklist that in a way that people interpret it as absolute rigid rules. It's a checklist for the teacher, so they think, am I doing this? Am I doing that? Am I following the process? And to support them in learning a routine. But it's not for the clipboard merchants to go around checklisting that you have done it in a certain way. It has to be owned by the teacher if they're going to do it with some fidelity. So adapt is printed on every page of the books. And it's an acronym, which means this. We need teachers to attempt strategies. So like, have we tried them? Do we know what they might look like? Let's have a look at what it feels like to do it. Then we have to be able to develop them. So sometimes we develop them by adding more steps in or referencing a specific resource or a specific aspect of the curriculum. Then we need to be able to adapt them if they're not quite right. So for example, with cold calling, you can adapt cold calling in lots of different ways. So for example, when you ask a student a question, you might want to give them more time to prepare. So you might get them to write their answer down. And then when you see a student has done a correct answer, you say, yeah, so Jason, that's right. Do you want to share that with the class? And Jason learns the confidence of giving his answer out loud because he already knows he's right. And that's an adaptation for a student who's perhaps less confident and doesn't really feel comfortable giving their answer without knowing it's right first. So you can adapt for lots of different reasons. And then practice. You don't get good at anything in life without repetition and practice and rehearsal and review. So it's important that when we're implementing techniques in training, that we encourage teachers to take an idea and work on it, sustained focus, and all the research, and there's lots of walkthroughs which reinforce this, emphasizes the need for teachers to focus on a few ideas and practice them to build up some fluency with the strategy. And finally, test. Part of a good professional learning culture is that we don't sit around saying, oh yeah, it's going really well for me, that's fine. How's it going for you? Yeah, it's going pretty well for me. And everyone's sort of patting themselves on the back and saying how good it all is. We need to be more rigorous than that. We need to be saying, well, how do we know it's going well? So we need to test things out. And the ultimate test is not the opinion of the observer who happens to pass by. It's the evidence in the student work. So if I'm getting better at cold calling, the evidence will be that it's evident that more children are involved, more children are giving more extended verbal answers, more children are more confident in giving responses. There are fewer students who don't say anything in a lesson. And also the teacher is more responsive. You feel that you're more getting the sweet spot of teaching the students right where they are because you've found out more precisely what they've understood. It could be that with a modeling walkthrough, the test is that just the quality of writing is better. That's the acid test, isn't it? Is my modeling of writing leading to better writing? And you're testing it through the evaluation of the standards of the work that you're getting. So adapt is important. So we take a walkthrough and we adapt it. Now, one of the other questions we're asked is that given this, if I highlight on another page, say explaining and modeling, you've got 10 from volume 1, and now we've given you another 10. So already there are 20 possible walkthroughs for explaining and modeling, because it's a big area of instructional teaching. And knowingly, it's all at once, it's overwhelming. Each one of them has its place if you go through the list. Like worked examples and backward fading is a really powerful strategy, especially with maths instruction. It's very common. Live modeling, scaffolding is huge when you're doing any kind of writing. setting the standards. Any open-ended task needs standard setting, but standard setting applies to many aspects of the curriculum, knowing what excellence looks like. And then we get into some of the volume 2 reading. We've got several reading routines that have been written for us by Alex Quigley, who's an expert on reading, giving a practical demonstration. How, if I'm doing a practical demonstration, do I make sure that students have understood the link between the concepts we were talking about and the visual, and how do I make that really work? So we have to be selective though. From this, all this sort of smorgasbord of possibilities, we then got to cut it into making a selection. So what do we choose? Well, what we suggest is that we don't choose them based on how we feel or the things I fancy. We base them based on this. We solve the learning problems. So through this walkthrough, we're saying, what we do is we review student performance, we work out the things they're good at and where they have issues, and then we prioritize. We even look at how precise it is. So yesterday I was in a primary school in Leicester, and we spent a lot of time talking about, where the crunch point is with writing. What's the problem when you're trying to model? And a lot of them were talking about the range of response, like it's quite complicated to model when you've got a range of attainment already in the class. And so what you're modeling is hard to be precisely attuned to a range of students. And that was the problem. So you've got to think about strategies that might bridge that. And that might be to do with moving from guided practice to independent practice. So the way that you do that. And so there's walkthroughs that deal with that. It might be to do with more scaffolding. So some of the children need a more scaffolded approach within the same task, so that they can do the task, but just with more help. But you can still be talking about the same task, and other students have less help, but with the same task. So scaffolding is a walkthrough that we look at. So you select the walkthrough which addresses the needs of the learners, not the teacher. So it's not about, am I a good teacher or a bad teacher? It's about what could I do differently or more effectively so that the learners learn more in this particular context. And we found that that's just such a refreshing approach for teachers. They're not constantly being judged. We're not about grading or judging or evaluating your quality. We're talking about solving problems that you genuinely have, because teaching is complicated. And then we adapt it. So we think of a strategy which is generically called scaffolding, and then we take the generic version, as Oliver has designed, so that there's no backgrounds, there's no noise, and we put it into our context. We put it into our classroom, into our subject, and make it real for us in our situation. So that's such an important process. And then, even then, some people say, okay, but where would you begin? Because people find this overwhelming, and I'm not surprised. Where do I start? So we have this implementation plan, which is one of the things, but one of the things we were asked a lot is, well, which walkthroughs do you think are common? So when we had 100 subscribers back in June last year, we asked people, we did a survey on Google, a Google form, and we got a response which was really good. People selected 10. And we made a special workbook for people for 10 specific walkthroughs. And this is what they came up with. If I just make that slightly bigger. These are the 10 walkthroughs that people selected by vote. Positive relationships and establish your expectations. So those are things to do with behavior management and creating a culture. Sequence concepts in small steps, which is a really important part of curriculum thinking. So making sure, and that comes straight out of Rosenshine's principles of instruction, but it's such a common thing. If we're going to model, we have to model in steps. If we're going to explain things, we model it step by step. Live modeling and scaffolding are two popular ones, and that's from the explaining section. Cold calling and check for understanding, those are two questioning techniques, really core. Lots of people work on those. And then quizzing and weekly and monthly review and guided practice in the practice and retrieval section. So the 10 walkthroughs that people picked scan the sections in the whole book structure. Now for each of these, we then provided a page. If I click on one of these, say quizzing, it takes you to a page in the workbook where the quizzing walkthrough is presented at a sort of headline level. We still encourage people to go to the source. So it says page 112 there, because if you just read the subheading, there's a danger that you engage with the ideas at a surface level. So we would say, open the page, go to quizzing on page 112 and read it in detail. Maybe then open the slides, and what happens here is that the slides open in you can open them here, they can open also in the page, so we can go through the slide deck which matches the book. And there's a video. So you can watch the video of me explaining quizzing. And then there are some reflection questions. So what type of quizzing do you use? Do you vary the question style? And we've had support from some other colleagues to help us write all these questions. So that's an important thing. So the core 10 has got this additional level of kind of extra structure. And then at the back of this workbook, we're starting to develop more resources to do with the whole process. So here we've got, for example, an observation tracker. And we're finding, again, lots of schools and colleges are starting to develop these, either using this form or other Google tools or other Word documents, where we record observations and feedback processes using in the same workbook as all the reflections on all the walkthroughs. So you've got tools that are in the materials which help you engage teachers with the ideas, follow their progress, and it becomes a really powerful reference point for all your discussions about professional learning. The beauty about Google Docs is that when you go to when you open this up in Google, there's a share button which says share, and you can share it with who you like. So there's an empowerment there. Teachers can share it with their colleague or with their line manager or with their coach, and they kind of own that. So it feels it belongs to them. So that's what we got to with the core 10. But then we started getting people saying this, this, and this, and combining ideas together. We're thinking 10 is actually just quite a limited number, but also it doesn't let people be as flexible. So then the next level was this. So the next development has been the cluster builder. And this to me is like the optimum, the kind of pinnacle of where we've got to with the development. We're constantly developing it more. And this is a part of the material. So when you sign up to Walkthroughs, you get access to this. So what we've designed is the hexagons become something else. In fact, this is where they started. So in this slide deck, which is called the cluster builder, now you can see it says Tom's Walkthrough cluster builder, because I've made a copy of it. And every single teacher in a school can own this as a copy of their own. So everyone can make a copy of it. And what it does is, at first level, it's just a browser. So you can just say positive relationships. And each time I click on one of these icons, material around that walkthrough comes through. So it shows me, I can open it inside the document. It's got a reflection page. It's got the slides, video, some notes, some questions. And I can think about this idea of establishing my expectations. I can copy that and write on it. So it's got a kind of browsing thing, like which walkthrough am I interested in? And I can do this without the book. I can just study it here. And I can look at, say, all the question and feedback ones. But then this is the reason we made it. And we can start combining them because these things move. So I can move this and I can copy it. And I can copy and paste it. So I can start collecting them. So for example, I could collect the ones together to do with questioning. Actually, think, pair, share, cold calling, and check for understanding really work well together as a set of walkthroughs. Quizzing and not using a knowledge organizer go well together because there's no point in having a knowledge organizer if it's not for some retrieval practice method. And if you're doing quizzing and you want children to prepare for some kind of quizzing, having a knowledge organizer helps them do that. So these things go hand in hand. Behavior management techniques go hand in hand. So positive framing links to expectations, but also the technique of signal, pause, insist, how you get a class's attention is important. And again, these three strategies really work together. So how do you do that? Well, what you can do is you can drag the icons onto a page, onto a blank here like this, and you can resize them and say, no, I want cold calling is important to me. Say it again better is slightly less important, but I want to think about that. And show me boards is also something I'm working on. And this idea of metacognitive talk and getting children to talk about their thinking, that sort of thing. So the main thing I'm thinking about is cold calling, but I've got these three other questioning techniques. And that becomes an isolated set of walkthroughs that I just want to work on at any given time. And the beauty of this is I can go to File, Make a Copy, and just select that slide. And I can copy that slide and email it to all my colleagues and say, here's our agenda, guys. We're going to work on cold calling and these other three strategies. And they just get that, and they've got all the tools they need just on a simple slide, take it off the website, and people can just have that on their phone. It's so easy to access. And there's so many things. And we've done ones for example, learning support. So this is what I made for a group of teaching assistants. We looked at all the different things that they might find useful. Sorry. This is one that we made about assessment. So collecting ones that relate to assessment. And each of these are sort of can exist on their own. So you can cluster together the walkthroughs. And of course, with the volume 2 coming through, you can the volume 2 ones will soon be on there as well. And then you'll be able to combine between the 2 sets. So the cluster builder is the kind of next level of like, it's so many permutations, it's great, but it's like a sketch pad. So what I find when I'm thinking about this and I'm talking to a teacher, we sit side by side, 3-point communication, and we look at this and I say, so which techniques do you want to look at? Cold calling is the main one, but what else? And we're studying this, and we kind of use the positioning to just kind of get our sense of priorities. And then we say, okay, so let's zoom in now. Let's open this up. What is cold calling? And we start talking about the detail of it, and we use it right there and then. And it's just great. It's just present, it's there. And then if I want to do a training session on it, I open this up and I say, okay, guys, we're all going to talk about cold calling now. Make it nice and big. I can open up the slides from here. And it just makes it also accessible. So we're going to do a training session on cold calling in our team, and it's all come from the cluster builder, and that's how the resources work. So hopefully that's given you a feeling from it. All of this stuff spins off the central website, and it is accessible as soon as you subscribe. And subscribers get sent 5 books and then have access to that. So I'm going to stop sharing there because then I'm going to bring in a couple of our excellent users. So Fran, I don't know if you're around or if Matt is available.
Hi.
So Fran, can you come on camera? I can't quite see you.
I am here.
Oh, there you are, fantastic. Yeah, so I'm introduced to Fran Harrow. So Fran contacted me last year and was interested in using Walkthroughs across Harringay. And we've been working together since. And well, I won't say any more because you might be saying this, but I invited Fran to come and talk to us, partly because she is physically the nearest person to me. Her office is kind of across a couple of streets away, which is kind of bizarre. But it's also because she's one of the great enthusiasts and has actually seen the potential of Walkthroughs beyond just one school, but into many. And so I'd like to Fran, just tell us a little bit about what you've done with HEP and how you've been working with you.
So Harringay Education Partnership is really briefly is a schools-led, schools-owned, schools-created school improvement partnership. So we have just over 100 member schools across Harringay and Enfield, which are 2 London boroughs. And, you know, we focus purely on school improvement and outcomes for children. And the core part of that is the focus on challenge and development of leadership, curriculum and pedagogy, and then with everything that sits around that. And we started to develop with Christine Council a really strong Key Stage 2 curriculum. And we found that Walkthroughs, where we started to look into Walkthroughs, was the perfect match for that. And it has been absolute gold. And so we've got over 60 of our member schools that are subscribers, just coming up to 60 now. And, you know, the thing I want to say is the power of this for one teacher is phenomenal. The power of this for a school is times by 10, but on a system level, it is, you know, the impact is unimaginable. And it has hit so many markers. And I go back to what Oliver said at the beginning about that lethal mutation. It has stopped that. And the professional conversations, the professional talk amongst teachers within schools and across networks has really strengthened. It's given teachers such a strong base to actually revisit the craft of teaching in a really safe way. It's reinvigorated things like lesson study in and across schools because they're using instructional coaching with each other, as well as from kind of mentors to teachers and the other way around. And so we've kind of really have nailed our colours to the mast with this, and we're seeing such phenomenal kind of inputs. And you know, schools are using it at different kind of stages and they're using it in different ways. So you know, some schools are taking on a single walkthrough aspect at a time. Other schools are building it around the age and stage of their teachers. There's a mixed model going on where you might have a whole school theme, say particularly for cold calling, might be the first one, and then teachers might use the cluster builders then to add maybe 1 or 2 other elements that they're going to be working on for their own professional development. Going back to seeing what children really need. And we're finding also that there's leakage into the children. The children understand what cold calling is and why teachers use it and what they're seeking from them. So it is phenomenal. I don't think really Tom and Oliver have quite grasped the impact it has on quite a global scale. And you know, it's about those teacher networks as well. It's having that fidelity, but with the flexibility as well. It's really high challenge, but low threat. It really hits all of those really kind of key markers. It's that shared understanding. It's codified what we all know to be true. And it's, you know, if I asked all of you to describe, I don't know, guided reading to me, I'd have what, 156 different versions of that. And this is what this stops. It absolutely stops that, and it enables us all to be focusing on the right things. You know, from our point of view, we would say that every teacher needs to know and be able to use this, every teacher, because it really does focus in on the craft of teaching, and it stops the kind of children having good quality teaching by chance. It really does kind of systematize that, but also gives you and teachers the freedom to be really flexible and be creative with it, because actually the core of it is really, really clear. It's given us a really new language for learning, but not by teaching us a new language, by bringing together the old language and really making that very, very clear. And like I say, the instructional coaching and lesson study was great, but it kind of was all a bit dim and distant, but this has really brought clarity to that. And, you know, the cluster builders are great, and get to know this stuff. It is an absolute gift, really. I feel like I'm like a walking advertisement, really.
Yeah.
But, you know, but what I'm saying is the impact on children, you know, together with a really rigorous curriculum, it takes the chance out of who you're going to get as a teacher.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Fran. That's great. I mean, one of the things I found, for example, I've done a couple of days online with some of the schools in Harrow. So I've had like 7 or 8 different schools I'm talking to during the day, and I've visited several. And basically, that school is using it in this way because that's where they're at, and they're choosing those walkthroughs. And then that school is decided to go more sort of a bit more free, because different year groups need to focus on different things. And that's what's useful about it. But at the same time, whenever you say check for a standing, cold calling, and you know, everyone
knows what you're talking about. And you know, what we found is that leaders have really kind of invested in this and bought into this. There's so many of our schools now, you know, following the reopening and pandemic and all the kind of mess that's gone on over the last 18 months, is that their absolute focus in terms of their professional development for next year is rooted in the walkthroughs. And I can't wait to see where we are this time next year in terms of the quality of teaching. And when we go into schools and we're engaging with teachers on the ground, it gives us a real common language to talk about, you know, what makes great teaching. And well, it's just a real gift to have it there.
Well, thanks, Fran. That's really great. I mean, and it is a real joy to have that level of enthusiasm. So I'm now going to bring in Matt. So Matt, where are you? I saw you there. There you are. So Matt is he's a deputy head at his school, in charge of teaching and learning, and they have this fantastic outreach program there. But he's like through Twitter has been saying, look what we've made, look what we've made. And I was going, oh my God, your stuff's better than ours. So I sort of quickly asked Matt to give everybody the gift of his Google site. So what I just showed you there was actually Matt's work. He made that, and which is amazing. So but it's not just that, is it? So you've got the techie side of it, but it actually starts from a place of understanding teachers as well, just like Fran. So Matt, tell us a bit of the story from Heal Thee.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So my name's Matt. I'm assistant head at Heal Thee Comprehensive School in South Wales. Unlike Fran, at a very different end of the scale, really. We're a very small school. We've got just short of 700 pupils. We're 11 to 18. We serve a very deprived community as well, a former mining community. So our kind of bread and butter and our aim is as high a quality kind of teacher and learning experience for our pupils as possible, just to try and bring them back onto a level playing field. And so last year, really, kind of way back when kind of Walkthroughs 1, the lovely yellow book, first came out, we kind of took an interest because we designed a teacher and learning charter where we'd identified some principles for a really effective learning and teaching that we wanted to be common across our school. And one of the elements on that was about just basic good quality instruction. So things like explanation and modeling, questioning, practice, and those kind of things that we take for granted but don't necessarily focus explicitly enough on. And so for us, that was really plugging a gap. And so we introduced Walkthroughs, and I suppose we could describe it as like an edited menu of CPD for staff, where we we're running kind of a professional growth program for staff, and but we edited the choice, so we were trying to collectively focus on those areas. So I think Tom refers to this now as like a core 10, essentially, that lots of schools design for their own priorities. And that's where we were when kind of lockdown 1 hit back in March and derailed us slightly. But again, and Fran mentioned like being a walking advert for Walkthroughs. I apologise if this sounds like a sales pitch, but it is a bit, right? But Walkthroughs came to the rescue again because we had a sudden need to put teachers in front of computer screens and get kids engaged and check for understanding and ask questions and elicit kind of really high quality responses. And as you all know, it just wasn't blooming easy to do that. So having kind of a refocus on a common core against what we then called our remote charter, and say, well, actually, these are the things that we want to happen in these lessons. These are the principles of teacher learning that we want to really excel in. And these are the walkthroughs that we think are going to support us getting there. So we identified kind of 20 walkthroughs against each of the, in total, against our charter. And then we did some kind of really focused training around staff during those lockdown periods, just to say, look, let's have a look at cold calling. Let's have a look at checking for understanding. Let's have a look at giving kids time to respond to kind of probing questions and process questions. And actually, we were able then to kind of raise the level of quality in our online operation again. And that was really, really successful. And you know, when we then kind of returned to face-to-face teaching, and what was kind of happening in the background was that dawning realization that actually there's real potential behind a longer-term framework to support teacher growth. The walkthroughs could be pivotal too. So we began building our approach to kind of using walkthroughs as an overlay to an impact cycle for instructional coaching. So we based our own coaching framework on the Jim Knight model, and walkthrough serves as that kind of instructional playbook that sits behind that. And that cycle then kind of takes staff through 3 main phases of developing their practice. So and we kind of identified the role of walkthroughs, you know, in all of those phases as a really vital kind of cog in that wheel. So looking at how do we identify a current reality for a teacher, and you know, in terms of what's going on in their classroom, and how do we have the shared language of the type of kind of behaviors and kind of patterns that we want to see in the teacher learning that we're kind of looking at. And so the first phase, the identify phase, ends with the coaches kind of advocating some walkthroughs which are bespoke to the learning problem. So it might be kind of between 3 or 4, and that's not to say here are 4 that you're fixed, go and take them into the classroom, but go away and look at the materials behind them. So we share then the kind of the slides and the explainer videos, and we ask them to go away and do a bit of thinking about what would that look like. You know, is that what we're looking for? Is that the type of thing that we're after to kind of support our classroom practice? And then we reconvene the following week, and we use part of the adapt template process that Tom was talking about earlier then. So we take those kind of collection of walkthroughs, that mini cluster, if that's what we're looking at, and we kind of start to tweak and adapt it then and work on what would this look like if we were to take it into the classroom. And then that learn phase of the cycle, then we kind of practice it, we model it, we kind of refine it so it becomes a routine that might be almost ready to take into the classroom. And the coach will work closely with the teachers kind of see what does that look like and to support them with their practice. And then we take that then into the classroom, and the teachers start working on that improved structure framework. And what we like about that, and the walkthroughs, and this is where Oliver's graphics really come in as well, is we ask them to kind of have that on their desk, you know, to have the walkthrough, whether it's the book or whether it's an adapted version of it. So we print out a blank version, we get them to kind of really kind of adapt it to it suits their purpose, and we have it on the desk. So you've got that kind of constant reminder when you're in the classroom that this is what I'm working on, and here it is. And I don't have to get it all, but if I've got some of it, I get these steps, and we might even go a little bit more granular and work on it a step at a time. And that process goes on for 5 weeks, where the teacher is working on that particular problem for 5 weeks with their coach. And that's been brilliant for us. We are a school that has had a checkered history with Estin, which is the Welsh Inspectorate, where we've been, back to 10 years ago, we're in special measures. As recently as 5 years ago, we're in an Estin review. And we call this kind of feeding the pig. I know this made Tom laugh when I told him about this, right? So we've got our mission statement with this is feeding the pig, because we spent so much time weighing it from kind of inspection to inspection, and framework to framework, and not actually doing anything afterwards. So measuring the quality of teaching and not doing anything to improve it, but expect it to be better next time. Whereas now this is all about kind of fattening up those teachers so that our kids have got the best possible versions of the teachers in front of them, you know, particularly in this climate with kind of COVID and all of that, those challenges going on as well. And at every step of the cycle, then that kind of walkthroughs is the common language and the lingua franca, Ollie, I think we call it, which kind of ties it all together, which is lovely. Tom mentioned then, and just to pick up on Fran's point about that system level impact as well. You know, we decided the world was not enough for us at Healthy, so we started kind of branching out and thinking, you know, why is there a relatively low take up in Welsh schools? And what are the barriers there? So we started doing a bit of work with our regional consortia, which is kind of the middle tier that sits above schools, and we have been lucky enough to kind of put on a series of kind of 4-day training sessions for kind of professional learning leads, assistant heads, deputy heads in charge of teacher learning to come into the school and kind of talk about how walkthroughs might change professional learning in their schools, and we advocate that kind of instructional coaching approach, and we give them some support in terms of the strategic elements and logistical elements of setting up. But actually what was really brilliant was our first cohort was predominantly made up of our cluster schools, our primary schools, and having that kind of, you know, the potential of those guys as well, kind of working on the same premise and kind of accelerating teaching and learning the same way that we are, again with that common language, kind of is a really powerful lever for us. So we are absolutely sold on it. We're running ahead and doing as best as we possibly can to get it embedded with us, but with as many different kind of schools locally as well. So we can recommend it highly enough.
Well, thank you so much. Honestly, this is what I love about Fran and Matt, is they're both real advocates for this whole thing of, like, really, I mean, Harringay and Healthy got a lot in common in terms of the demographic and the kind of that real need to improve things, but also that kind of zeal, the kind of real appetite for improvement. And it's just been great to have that enthusiasm. So one thing you'll find, yeah, go on, Fran, come in.
Just picking up on Matt's point, actually, is the cluster piece across schools in networks. I think, you know, there's real power there, and the work that Tom's doing with us in terms of our network learning communities. Our schools are split up into network groups. There is such power kind of across those networks as well, and you know, you can see enthusiasm build hugely on there. So, you know, going back to that, it's like I said, it's fabulous for an individual teacher, it's amazing for a whole school, but I think there's, you know, we're creating a movement here that is bringing back the focus on teaching and learning and the quality of teaching, and really supporting teachers to be self-driving and independent in their own development, which I think is giving the power back to the teachers again. And Matt, I'm up your way in a couple of weeks. I know that area well. I may drop in.
That's fantastic.
You're welcome. Drop in, yeah, please do.
So what you see there is we've got this community growing, and one of the things that you'll find by joining in with the walkthroughs is that there's so many people who want. So one of the other developments we're working on at the moment is a mapping of in England we have the early career framework for you know, early career teachers, and it's a government document, and schools from September are supposed to be delivering it. It's been rolled out and piloted, but now it's kind of across the country, and we've done a mapping of walkthroughs through it's almost like a giant cluster builder mapped against all the strands of the ECF document. And that has been done by Emma Turner, who is a key player in a big academy trust discovery based around Leicester. And without her, you know, her knowledge of the ECF has been instrumental in us being able to do that. So we've got a number of different people pioneering things, helping us shape our thinking, and we're only 1 year in. So we're hoping that that's been a useful overview. I mean, in terms of costs and buying in, we're trying to make it accessible. There are discounts people can get, and the primary, you know, if there are multiple schools coming in together, it's much less expensive than any one, and you can just go for the basic one and then expand later if you wanted to see if you like it, or you go straight in and it's slightly cheaper to buy it all at once. But that's the cost aspect. There's a link I've put there if you want to talk to them. There's an email you can email, and our head honcho at HQ is called Alex Sharrett. He's from John Catt Limited, and they basically deal with all the money side of things. And Oliver and I, if you join us, you'll see this all the time, because every month we do webinars, and also we do a limited amount of in-school training, but mainly we use this like this. it's great because we feel that we have this nice contact with people, which is not like any other book you'd normally write, where you just sort of goes out there and you never know anyone who's read it. But we feel like we've got this sort of family of Walkthroughs people joining our community, including in 28 countries. That's very exciting. So we've got a whole group of schools in Australia and different, it's mainly international schools, but a whole group of schools using Walkthroughs in Ghana and other places. It's quite exciting. So any other questions? I'm not seeing too many in the chat, but I hope that's given you an overview of what we're doing. Oliver, I don't know if you want to add anything further.
No, other than really, thank you, Fran and Matt. Fantastic. I was hooked and smiling and taking notes. It's really inspiring. Really inspiring.
Yeah, so thank you. So you can follow, if you follow Walkthroughs on Twitter, you'll see on our timeline just so many people sharing ideas from how they've interpreted things, what they've taken, how they've adapted it, all kinds of spin-off documents that people have made. It's great. We love it. You know, people are sending us photographs of this new sheet they've made, or they've chopped the whole thing up and use it as a reflection tool. And there's this creativity around there. So please do that. In America, thanks, Gail's put in the chat there that Walkthroughs is available in the US. We've got some schools developing. We got our first school, which is in New Orleans, that joined us a while back, and we were really thrilled about that. So people are joining us from all over the place, and you know, we're feeling it's going from strength to strength. So yeah, so people who subscribe to this webinar, every time we do a session, we put it on our website, and if you've registered for the link in advance, you get emailed that link. So you'll be sent this. If you wanted to share this with other colleagues, you'll be sent an email with the recording, and then you can pass this on to other people if you want to, you know, let other people watch this discussion. So look, thanks very much. I hope that was useful, and please keep in touch. And I've put the email already in there, but it's as@johncat.com, and I'll answer any questions you've got. So thanks to Fran, thanks to Matt, thanks to Oliver, and thanks everybody for joining us.